Hi, I'm Nicole, and I'm excited to talk to you today about step 3 in finding names for the temple. And we're going to talk about analyzing descendancy trees. So I'm Nicole Dyer from Family Locket Genealogists, and I have written a book about how to find names for the temple, and I really want to share each step with you. So this is step 3 and chapter 3 in the book. We've already talked about how to review the accuracy of your tree in step 1. And then in step 2, we talked about analyzing your pedigree. Maybe you found you had a partial tree and your methodology will be to search for ancestors. Maybe you found you have a full tree and your methodology will be to list ancestors for descendancy research. And maybe you found that you have a very full tree with a lot of LDS ancestors, so your methodology will be to do descendancy research by finding starting points who are not LDS. So you've already listed your non-LDS ancestors by going back in each line until you find those who weren't members. And now you're on step 3, analyze descendancy trees. So today I'm going to show you how to create a descendancy tree in Pozilla and then count the number of targets. And then we'll talk about making a list of candidates for further research and what is a good candidate for further research and what is not. And after this step, you will be ready to start your research project in step 4, research. So our goal for today is to find a candidate for further research and to be able to do descendancy research with that person, because we're focusing on the methodology of those who have a very full tree with a lot of LDS ancestors. So let's talk about how to do that. We have already created a document with a table that has the names of our ancestors who are not LDS and whose ID numbers are listed here. We also made notes of who in their family joined the church, so that can help us when we're doing our descendancy tree. And now we're going to create a Pozilla tree and fill out the section of number of targets and 4 generations of a descendancy tree. So how do you do this? You create a Pozilla tree and then you count the targets. Then lastly, we'll fill out the column candidates for further research. So when I say target, what does that mean? Pozilla has created this term called target, and it refers to any person who reached childbearing age but has no children listed in Family Search. These are not the only candidates that you can use as starting points for a research project, but they are a helpful place to start. So why are we looking at the targets? Well, the goal in descendancy research is to find new relatives to add to the tree. And you start with an ancestral couple and find all of their children and all of the children's children and all the descendants. So if you look at a descendancy tree and you find somebody with no children listed, that's a sign that that person is a good starting point for research. You can find their spouse, then you can find their children, and if you add all of those people to the tree that you find, there'll be people who need their temple work done. So you'll have found names for the temple. So these targets are very helpful because they show when a spouse or a child is missing from the descendancy tree, and they show a good starting point for a research project, which is the next step. So we're trying to get ready to create a research project, so we need to find someone to start with. I'm going to show you how to create a tree in Pozilla to view the descendants of one ancestral couple. Then I'll show you how to count the targets. So first you go to pozilla.org and click on sign in. Then you sign in with your Family Search account, and this will pull in all of your ancestors for 6 generations. So you are at the bottom, and then all of your ancestors are here. And so you want to choose somebody from your list that you made last time, your list of non-LDS ancestors for descendancy research if you have a very full tree, or just your list of any ancestors for descendancy research if you don't have a super full tree, and choose somebody who you want to view their descendancy tree for. You can start at the top of your list. I'm going to start with Edward Kelsey and copy their ID number. Then you can change the ID here, put a new ID in for Edward Kelsey, and view the descendants by clicking here. Now Pozilla is creating a descendancy tree. This descendancy tree is showing Edward Kelsey in the center with his children in the first circle. You might notice that one of his children has a lot of descendants. all of this side of the circle are all descendants of William Henry Kelsey. He's also my direct ancestor because of this yellow line showing my direct line to Edward Kelsey. Edward William Henry Kelsey Jr., Edward Raymond Kelsey, and my grandmother. So the yellow line shows your descendants. Now we are looking for targets so that we can count how many targets are in this. Targets show people who are good candidates for further research. We want to be able to start a research project for one of the people in this tree and find their spouse or children. If we can find their spouse or children, then we can add them to the tree and we'll have new names to do for the temple work. So one of the problems here is that our tree is so full with all these LDS descendants over here that it's kind of hard to notice which other lines need work done. So one thing I like to do, and it helps if you made a note of this, is to hide those who join the church. So I made a note that Edward Kelsey's wife joined the church and his son William Henry Kelsey and daughter Matilda Louisa both joined the church. So I'm going to hide both of those children's trees because they joined the LDS church. So their descendants are mostly LDS. So I'm going to click on William Henry Kelsey and click Hide Tree. Now I only see the other children of Edward Kelsey. But one of his other children, a daughter, was also a member. So let's find her. Matilda Louisa Kelsey. So she died in Idaho, and a lot of her descendants are members of the church too. So let's hide her tree. Now we have a tree showing just Edward Kelsey and his children who were not members of the church. We have Eliza Ann. We only have her death date. These are the two children whose trees we hid. Then we have Ann Kelsey. We don't have any other information about her besides her name. There's Mary Ann Kelsey with a birth date and a death date, and Edward Edmund Kelsey with a birth and a death date, and Elizabeth Kelsey with only a birth date. So you can see there's a lot of opportunities for further research here. And one way that you can see the opportunities even more clearly is by clicking targets over here. Targets. Targets are suggested starting points for new research. They show persons with no child records who reached childbearing age, were born at least 110 years ago, and who lived within a specified place and time. So let's click targets and see how many there are. Okay, so now you can see the other parts of the tree are grayed out and only the targets are highlighted, and the targets now have a red square next to them. So we can easily count the number of targets here. 1, 2. We're skipping these 2 because they're the children who joined the church. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so there's 11 targets that fit within this range, which are suggested starting points for new research. And we can put that in our list. So let's put that in our list. And then we'll go back. So you can see this was 4 generations. If we increase it to 5 generations, sometimes we can get more descendants to show up. Okay, so now we have even more candidates for further research. Now you might be wondering, do we want to research the LDS lines? Yes, we do. It will be harder and most of the people will be LDS, but some branches may not have joined the church. So let's show this branch and let's see the targets for this branch. All right. Here's all the targets. Can you see how many there are? So many, hard to count. Here's the ones we already saw from Mary Ann Kelsey. Here are the targets from William Henry Kelsey's daughter, Harriet. There's one there. One there. Is that, oh, that's from, yep, that's another one. So it looks like we have 2. And maybe one here. Died recently in Provo. So you can see that many of these from the LDS line are very full and not many opportunities for further research. So that's why I hide those trees. So once we hide that tree again, we can see more. Hide the tree. There we go. So now we just have the descendants who were not LDS. Okay, so that is how you create a descendancy tree and view the candidates for further research by counting targets. So how can you tell if any of these targets are good candidates for further research? There's a few things you can look at. If the records are in a language that you can understand where they lived, then they're a good candidate. So if you're researching somebody in Denmark and you don't know Danish and all of the records are in Danish, you can certainly do a research project and learn a lot of Danish, but you might need extra help. So this might not be a good opportunity for you to do a beginner's project with. But if that's what you're wanting to do, then that's fine. Just think about that. And then another thing to think about is, are there records available during the time period that this person lived? And you'll be able to find that out by checking the Family Search Wiki or asking a family history consultant, or just knowing that most records are available after about 16 or 1700. Anytime before that, records are very scarce. Records are very available in the 1800s. The 1800s are a great time to research for a beginner's project, especially the latter half of the 1800s. Another aspect of a good candidate for further research is if they can be uniquely identified. Can this person be identified as different from another person with the same name? And that is, you can tell that that is the case if they have a full name, a first and a last name listed in Family Search, if they have a birth or a death date and a place. And the more specific the place, the better. If you just have somebody named Mrs. Smith and no place of birth, no place of death, and maybe just an estimate for her birth year, that's going to be a really difficult project to do. So it might not be a good candidate for further research. Lastly, record hints. If the person has several record hints that Family Search has already matched to them, then they are a good candidate for further research because there's already records that could be a match. All you have to do is go and check and see if they match. Somebody is not a good candidate for further research if they died before they reached childbearing age, or if they stayed single their whole lives and there's many sources attached to them, but none of them show that they ever got married or had children. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to find a good candidate for further research. Here's Edward Kelsey with his descendants. Now we're going to look at each target and see if any of them are good candidates for further research. Let's start here with Eliza Ann Kelsey. Death, April 1881. This is a good time period and a good place for records. I know there's records available in the 1800s, and I can read the language in England. Now let's see if there's any record hints. Click View in Family Tree, and a new tab will open, and will show me more about Eliza Ann in Family Search. Let's open the vital information. Christening, 26 April 1834 in Dover, Kent, England. Death, 1881 in Dover, Kent, England. I don't see a death record attached. Maybe the person who added it gave a reason. No reason. So now I have a question. Where did this death information come from? And I have another question. Did she get married? Are there any record hints? There are no pending record hints. So I'm going to add her to my list of candidates for further research. Eliza Ann Kelsey. Where did death date come from? Did she marry? No record hints. Okay, so she's an okay candidate, but since she has no record hints, it might be a difficult research project, especially if I'm a beginner. But if I'm not a beginner, then this would be a good project. All right, what's next? Let's go to this person, Ann Kelsey. Let's click View in Family Tree to see if there's any information there about her. Okay, it looks like Anne Kelsey was christened on 23 May 1824. And the reason that didn't show up here is because Pozilla only brings in birth dates, not christening dates. But a christening date in England was usually very close to when the child was born, so sometimes it's used as a substitute for a birth date. What records do we already have about Anne? Parish registers and birth and christenings. It looks like here is a parish baptism record for Anne Kelsey, and her father's name was Edward and her mother's name was Anne, and she was baptized in May 1824. And it looks like these are duplicates, so we have some duplicates. And then we have an index here without the image showing the same information. So we basically just have one record showing Anne Kelsey was born to Edward and Anne. So these are all duplicates as well. So all of these sources show that she was born. Looks like this one was indexed a little bit incorrectly. Okay. So my question is, did Anne get married? Did she live to adulthood? Are there any record hints? No, there's no record hints. But there is a possibility that she moved and got married in a different place outside of Kent, maybe in a neighboring county. So we can definitely do some searching to find out if she did that. So I'm going to add her. Did she get married? No record hints. So we still haven't found a very, very good candidate for further research, but we have found some possible research projects that might be a little more advanced because they don't have record hints. Let's go to the next. Edward Edmund Kelsey. Let's click here, View in Family Tree, to see if he has any record hints or any additional information. Okay, we have a suggestion that he may have children. It says that he died in 1848, so he would have been about 28 or 29 years old. So he died when he was younger. So the question is, did he get married? Look, there's a death record. This might say if he was married or single. Name, gender, age. Okay, this doesn't seem to say whether or not he was married or single. But here are two sources for his birth. A note that says he died. Yes. So here again, we have a candidate for further research who's okay, but doesn't have any record hints, and he died young, so there's a possibility he didn't get married. Edward Edmund Kelsey. Did he get married? No record hints. Died young. Okay, let's go to our next person. George Simmons, son of Elizabeth Kelsey. So let's check out George. George Simmons Jr., born about 1855 in England, died in 1913 in Wales. His mother was Elizabeth Kelsey. His father was George Carter Simmons. And here are some censuses attached to George. Person may have children. So we don't have a record hint, but we have some suggestions. And here we have a lot of census records. These census records should tell us if he had children and if he was married. Why don't we check the most recent one, 1901, and see what it says? It looks like he has a spouse, Elizabeth, and a lot of other household members. So someone attached this source, wonderful, but did not add his wife or children. So wow, we have just got very lucky. We found someone who has already had research done, and all we need to do now is add the names of these people to the tree, and then we'll be able to do their temple work if they're not already in the tree, if there's not duplicates. Great, so I'm going to make a note. Elizabeth Kelsey's son, George Simmons, need to add the people in the census records that are attached to him. Possible names to reserve for temple work. Okay, so at this point, you can review the sources that are attached, see if you think they're accurate, and if they are, you can add this information to the tree and skip step 4, which is research, and just verify back in step 1 that this information matches and is correct. And hooray! So you've found somebody that you can do temple work for. Now let's go back to this step and see if we can find any other candidates for a research project that have record hints. Thomas William Hoyle. Let's view him in the family tree. Thomas William Hoyle was born before 30 June 1898 to parents William Hoyle and Emma Johnson. Let's look at our tree again to see where he comes through. So his grandmother is Mary Ann Kelsey, and Mary Ann Kelsey's daughter is Emma Johnson. So Thomas William Hoyle is a great-grandson to our common ancestor, Edward Kelsey. Okay, so let's see what we can find about Thomas. Are there record hints? Yes. Here is a record hint for Thomas William Hoyle. There is one source already attached, a 1901 census, showing a wife and children. Wonderful. Oh, no. This is showing him as a son to his parents, William and Emma. So it's showing siblings. Now, are his siblings listed in the tree? No. So there again is an opportunity for us to review the source to see if it looks correct and finish adding all of those names to the tree. And if we do that, then we can reserve their names for temple work. So that's great. So let's add that to our list. We're just finding so many names for the temple already. Okay. Thomas William Hoyle. Add siblings from 1901 census to the tree and reserve names for temple work. Now, what about this record hint? Let's see some more details. So there is a 1911 census with his father, William, and a different mother. So this looks like a good starting point for a research project. So let's add to our note about Thomas William Hoyle that there is a research hint available for a 1911 census. So Thomas William Hoyle might be a good place to start a research project, because then we can find out if he had a stepmother from this 1911 census who would be another marriage for William. We can add all of his siblings, then we can try to see if he got married. He did live in 1898 though, so any children that he had would probably be born after the cutoff for the 110-year rule. So we'd want to go back in time to his parents and focus on researching their children. But this would be a good research project. All right, who else? Let's try Harriet Johnson. So Harriet Johnson is another daughter of Mary Ann Kelsey. Harriet Johnson was born in 1848 in England, so she lived in a good time period for records. There are 3 other siblings listed with Mary Ann Kelsey and John Johnson's family. There's one census from 1851 showing Harriet as the daughter of John and Mary Ann with those siblings. So immediately I have the question, were there more census records after 1851 showing this family? And there are no record hints, but we know that every 10 years in England there was a census kept. So I'm going to put that Harriet Johnson and her family may appear on additional censuses in England, 1861, 1871, 1881, etc. We can also look for her marriage. John Johnson. Let's do one more. So one more target from our tree, our descendancy tree of Edward Kelsey. John Johnson is the sibling of Harriet. Let's see if John has any record hints. Wow, John has 3 record hints. Look at that. And they're all birth and christening records. So we have his birth date as 1846, but that's an estimate, it looks like, from the census. And one of the birth records is already attached. So the other ones are probably duplicates. Let's look at those. All right, so we have parish registers and indexed birth records, all saying the same birth date and the same parents. Okay, so this doesn't help us with descendancy research. So let's go back. John Johnson doesn't have a source record hint attached that might help us, but we could do a research project to see if he got married. So we'll add him to our list of possible research projects. Look for marriage record. All right, so now you can see how to look through each target and find out if they were a good research candidate or not. So if I were going to do anything right now, I would probably go back to those records that were already attached and showed names that weren't in the family tree. So I'd go to Elizabeth Kelsey's son, George Simmons, and add the names of his siblings. And then I would also do the same for Thomas William Hoyle. So now you know how to find candidates for further research and what to do next.